Jen, we're good? All right, how are we feeling, Superset? Oh, we're leaving a lot more. It's like 3:30. It's the afternoon, we're leaving a lot more energy. How are we doing, Superset? All right. This is hopefully going to energize you guys because we're going to talk about the latest enterprise. Do I need a mic? Sure. We're going to talk about the newest formation at Superset called Symmetry. I'm here with my co-founder and my partner in purpose, Jed Putterman. And what is Superset doing with Symmetry? Well, let us tell you a little bit about who we are, what we're doing, and our mission, vision, and all that good stuff. But Symmetry is going to focus on what we think is going to be the most important thing that is happening over, call it, this next wave. If we saw the first inning of the AI revolution really being from, call it, November 30th, 22, when ChatGPT came out, to call it this summer when OpenAI came out with their first agent, the next inning is really going to be about agents. It's going to be about agentic AI. And so we believe that every single enterprise will have to become agentic, and every single function in the enterprise will be agentic as well. Agentic finance, commerce, you name it, and of course, agentic marketing. Hence, we are going to be focused on agentic marketing, and Symmetry is going to be the platform, the agentic marketing platform for brands. And so what are we doing? Through our intelligent data fabric and our knowledge graph, we're going to deploy purpose-built AI agents and orchestrate multi-agent networks that continuously learn, predict, and optimize every single part of the customer journey on behalf of brands. And this is going to, in turn, drive revenue growth and help them make smarter business outcomes. And we really want to focus on the outcomes because at the end of the day, what is an agent? It's goal-oriented. It's going to achieve an outcome, not just outputs. And so I want to talk a little bit about the why, the how, and the what. And so if you have heard of the books Start With Why by Simon Sinek, anyone, have you read that book? Raise your hand. No? Okay. This is actually a great TED Talk. If you get a chance, watch Start With Why. And I've been working in tech for a long time. I started my career at a little startup that came out of MIT called Akamai Technologies back in 1999. Started in the engineering group there, network infrastructure. And I always remember this book because there's so many cool things that we could do. And obviously, Jed, as you and Vivek say, we could build anything. The what is not the problem. A lot of the times we get stuck on maybe the how, but the why has to be bigger than each and every one of us. I try to remind folks that every single company that I've been at, no one wakes up in the morning saying, I need to buy some Symmetry today. No one gives a shit about that. They care about their problems. And so how can they actually care about what you have to say if you can't show that you care about their issues, their challenges, their problems? You have to start with a bigger why. So the Symmetry why. Right now, I don't need to tell this crew, we are seeing the most radical transformation in consumer behavior. And all of us here are actually consumers in one way, shape, or form. So just show of hands, who here is using AI every day? Right? Every day, everyone's hand is up, right? Now imagine if you are a brand. If you are, call it Target. If you are a brand like Dove from Unilever. If you are a financial services firm like Discover or JP Morgan Chase. All of those brands are now having this existential moment that, oh my gosh, all the things I've been doing for the past 25 years in digital marketing, it's out the window. Because the consumer experience has fundamentally changed on every single dimension. And so here's Jensen. He gave this talk at the beginning of this year when he was at CES. What is kind of next after Gen AI? Obviously, agentic. And so when we think about this, it truly is a moment. And I don't care about that MIT report where obviously they're talking about all these failures, that 95% of enterprises are failing at AI. This is going to be a process, but I promise you, every single enterprise will become agentic. And as a result, all the different functions are going to have to become agentic. And we are going to be entering what we talk about as the agent economy. And I know there's some other formations in here that are focused on, agent-to-agent transactions. When you really start to think about what that means in a very profound way, all of consumer behavior is going to radically change. And so when you think of where we were at the beginning of the iPhone in 2007, there's an app for that. I truly believe there's going to be an agent for that, whatever it is. And we know that consumers adopt technology first, always much faster than the enterprise. We haven't had the consumer agent moment yet, yet being the key word. But it's going to come. There's going to be a consumer app that's going to do your travel. And you're going to be like, hey, you know what? I want to go to Mexico, not during the vacation time. I want to do it maybe off-peak. I want to spend up to this amount, up to like maybe $500. I want 72 degrees, at a minimum in terms of weather. Go, and that agent will accomplish that goal. And once consumers start to adopt this, well, it's going to radically change how brands are going to have to engage with them. And so this is really what we talk about as the agent economy. Because once you start to see that there's going to be a brand new discipline, a brand new way that consumers are going to be engaging with brands, well, how are brands going to compete? Brands are not prepared for the fact that they are actually going to be scored. They're going to get judged every single day. And you have to actually speak this new language that is actually about machines. And we know that we've spent the past 25 years trying to figure out data. I mean, Lord knows, Tom and Vivek built a whole company, and they created a whole category with customer data platforms to help brands manage data, and they still don't have their data house in order. So this is going to be a huge issue, because ultimately, brands are used to talking to people. Well, guess what? All those beautiful pictures and all those great stories and your Instagram posts, agents don't give a shit about any of that. They actually care about data. So how do you start to influence agents, not through the storytelling, but through your data? Well, it's not a or, it's an and. So how do you now develop a brand new discipline? If you are at P&G, if you are at Clorox, if you are at Walmart, if you are at any of these brands, you don't have anyone that knows how to do this. So this is where we come in. And when we think about how are we going to go to market, who is going to be the ICP, this becomes a challenge that we've just been talking about over the past, call it, 2 days, because we had our own little offsite. We're trying to figure out where do we find the brands that are going to lean in, because the agents aren't here today, but they are coming. Already consumers are using AI, but you don't have the team and the practice. So how do you find that entry point, that insertion point that's really going to make a difference? So we initially started to focus on enterprise clients. And again, there's 2 different maybe ways that you could start. You could start long tail and do self-service, or you could really go after enterprises that are going to pay you very large numbers and have annual recurring revenue, and we're going to start with the enterprise client. So we spoke about the why, something bigger than ourselves. No one's waking up to talk about symmetry, but they are trying to figure out, how do I learn about agentic marketing? Okay, well then, now it gets into the how. This is obviously a very crowded space because, as Tom has noted, marketers, they have budget, they're curious, and they'll talk to you. They'll actually want to learn and spend time. The challenge is there's so much noise. And so how do you differentiate? This is why I truly believe that we will win, because we start with the substance and we actually start with data. As we all know, none of these agents are going to work unless you have data fueling them. And it's not just generic data on the public internet or Reddit bullshit. It's actually enterprise first-party data. So when we think about our steps, our kind of stack, well, one, we're AI native, but we start with data to unify all different types of data within the enterprise. It could be structured, unstructured. We'll create synthetic data, real-time, streaming, all different types of data, fuse it together to really now create a customer graph. And imagine that, having the ability to understand every single customer touch point. That knowledge graph is then going to fuel the agents. And I was telling one of the CMOs a few days ago about how we think about this, and they're like, oh yeah, we got folks coming in, folks like Writer, or maybe it's Glean or someone like that, and they're helping us with some agents. It's all do it yourself. I'm like, really? So do you want to go into Home Depot and buy the lumber and the nails and you're going to build your own home? That's probably not a good use of your time, because while you're trying to figure out how to build an agent, your competitors are eating your lunch. How about you actually have specialized, out-of-the-box agents that just work? How about that? So you could focus on your business. Let's focus on driving these business outcomes. That's a much more compelling pitch. And then, once you have not just one agent, tens, hundreds, thousands of agents eventually, every brand will have an agent network.
multi-agent networks that need to be orchestrated with your guardrails, your governance, all of the things that brands are going to care about, because now you're actually having brands execute on your behalf. So when you put this all together, this now becomes the AI native full stack for agentic marketing. The data and the customer graph is kind of your data tier, and then you have the agents and the orchestration as kind of your agentic layer. And now you start to see the symmetry of what we're talking about. It's humans and machines. It's data and agents. This whole idea of that these things need to work in harmony, and ultimately, when you have so many agents, you will see this symphony of agents working together to really drive business outcomes. This now opens up the question about, okay, we spoke about the why in our ICP. Now, how do you go to market? We really have to figure out how to understand and stand the pain of our customers, and there's a lot of pain, starting with one of the first agents that we're going to talk about, which is specifically AEO. But when you start to kind of stand in the pain of the customer, we're really trying to break this down into workflows. So what is the problem? Don't talk to me about all your amazing tech and what it could do. Use my language. Tell me, hey, what are your biggest challenges? Well, you know what? I have challenges trying to get my creative to actually talk to every single customer. How do I personalize that message? Or you know what? I need to actually find new customers. How do I grow my business? Like, these are the real business challenges that all these marketers need to figure out, because they're being asked every single day, do more with less. I'm going to cut your budget. I'm going to cut your headcount. How do you grow when you actually have fewer and fewer resources? And then, of course, everyone is calling you up that they have a widget. Oh, I got an AI-enabled blah-de-blah, and I'm going to talk tech jargon to you until you're blue in the face. No one has time for that. So if we can actually identify what are the challenges, figure out how our platform is going to enable these new AI-enabled channels, that's where we could win. And we kind of think about this as a portfolio approach around every single step of the customer journey. Things that have to do with customer acquisition at the beginning of the journey, around awareness and engagement, then around conversion, which is around consideration and actually purchase. And then after you actually have them as a customer, how do you retain them? How do you avoid churn? Well, things around loyalty and other things like that. So we have a lot of things that we are kind of coming at from different dimensions, the customer journey, but certainly when you think about the workflows, there's things that are kind of back of the house, maybe more infrastructure, how do you actually clean up your data, things that are probably front of the house, things around like your media strategy, your insights, maybe some of your measurement, and then things that are going to be external, that are actually touching a customer. So back to understanding where is the insertion point, and every client is going to be at a different stage, and they're going to care about something different. So we don't want to say, hey, we do this one thing, and then they're like, oh, but that's not a priority for me, and then you're kind of out of luck. How do you actually come up with a little bit more of a flexible approach? Hey, we could actually help you solve problems. One, understanding how to unify your data, but that is going to fuel all these agents. Which is the biggest challenge that you have right now? Let's stack rank the top 3, and then we can actually figure out how to have our agents solve those problems for you. Business outcomes. So with that, let me pass it to my partner, Jed, and we'll talk about a specific example with AEO.
Great. Thanks. Hey, everyone. So, I learned 2 things. One is never go after the marketing guy. Steve is awesome and tells the story of what our company is really about. But the story starts with a single agent, right? Because our whole system relies on building information and creating outcomes, but there has to be a problem that they're actually dealing with. And so the first one that we're going to talk about is something called, we call it AEO, it's Answer Engine Optimization. There's a bunch of different names out there, but really it starts with the precursor, which was SEO, right? So you have search engines that are out there that were traditionally crawling your site, and of course this predicates on the fact that people were getting their information by going to a search engine, Google obviously the largest, and asking a question, right? And the question was really framed in a way where you knew what you were trying to get to, so you were trying to get the bits and pieces of information so you could put those together into an answer, right? So the onus was really on you, and if you didn't ask the right question, you got a lot of garbage out of the system. And wouldn't it be cool if you could actually ask the question that you actually wanted to know, which was to get to the final answer, and that's where AEO comes in. there's a lot of talk about, search is dead and Google is dead, and it's not quite true, right? Search is very much alive, and Google, as we're seeing, is very much alive and actually doing great in this whole new economy. But the way that people are starting to think and reframe and ask the questions is changing, and it's up to us now to adapt with those times. The famous, you go in there and, let's pick an example, which is I'm looking for a really healthy dog food for my new puppy that I just got. And so, I typically would go into Google and I might search on dog food and I might search on organic dog food, and then I would search on, I don't know, healthy coats for puppies, and I get a bunch of links and I start to click through those links and I start to get information, and I'm compiling that information. And obviously, in the world of AI and LLMs, we kind of thought, well, what if I just asked ChatGPT, or what if I just asked Claude? In the early days, you got a great answer. It was all made up, but it was very, very cool, right? And made up names and companies that didn't exist and directions to go buy them in places, cities that didn't exist. So, but over time, what's happened is the LLMs are starting to pull in real-time information. They're doing the things that we were doing directly on Google. They're just doing them on our behalf. And we're starting to build that kind of trust where if I ask an LLM a question, or better yet, I just tell it what I want, they're starting to pull that information in and give me those answers. And so the question is, if I'm a brand, how do I make sure that I'm included in those answers? And so if I'm a small little dog food company in San Francisco, and there's actually a few of them if you're a pet lover, and someone's asking about this, how do I become relevant? And is Purina going to be the first thing that shows up as they do in Google? Or do I have an opportunity as this brand now to suddenly become important and surface myself in a way that would have taken a lot of research before? And so this is where we're starting to think about it and figure out what does that mode mean? What are the LLMs doing when those answers come back? What's actually happening behind the scenes? So a few stats that we thought were kind of interesting. The real interesting is that people are doing this, right? This is not made up. This is not the future. This is not, wouldn't that be cool? It's happening right now. I can certainly speak personally. I actually, when I need to know how to do something, I'm embarrassed to say, especially if it involves power tools, which I'm not very strong at, I go to the LLMs, really hope that they're being accurate, but also more and more starting to look for some of my information there. And it's happening everywhere, right? It's not a US, it's not a San Francisco thing, it's really happening around the world. We call it old school and new school, and it's really unfair because actually to do AEO properly, you need to do SEO properly. So it's not a either or, it really is, it's an everything, right? It's both. And so, AEO doesn't mean you can start having terrible websites that have no optimizations for search engines. You need to still do what you're doing. In fact, what we're learning as we're going in and we're offering these really cool solutions for AEO is actually we're fixing some basic SEO stuff that people got sloppy. And where it matters is that LLMs are, by their nature, they're kind of lazy, right? They want information presented to them in a fashion that makes it easy for them to absorb. They're incredibly capable, but also incredibly stupid at the same time. And so if you have a massive, terrible website with thousands of lines of HTML and JavaScript, and somewhere buried in there you have bits of your information, is oftentimes it's just too much information, and the key pieces will get overlooked, even though if you go to the site and you're there as a user, you look at it and you're like, wow, this is beautiful. Look at that picture that had all my information inside of it. In fact, I was so clever, I made a video, and my video is incredible. If you just watch my video, which people might be doing, but the search engines and the LLMs are not doing that. Okay? So, it moves from, being discoverable to providing the actual answers that people are looking for. So the real simple thing is if I can go to your site and from an LLM's perspective, if I have a question and you can give me that answer, then you're already off to a good start. And of course, that's not what's happening in most websites today. So we'll go through a bunch of different steps, including we'll pick on one of our favorite companies here. You guys are all our favorites. But one that we've talked to quite a bit is Catch, just because they're doing a lot right now in AEO, and we're going to start working with them because we're learning so much from them. And it's a discovery right now. The good news is that LLMs, it's not an adversarial relationship. Like OpenAI, it's not us versus them. We're not trying to reverse engineer them, and they're not trying to hide from us. Actually, they want to discover the brands, and if you're a brand, unless you're a media company trying to kind of protect your information, most brands want to be discovered, right? So it's on both sides. We've had a lot of conversations, and I know some people work at Anthropic and OpenAI, and I feel like in some ways they're learning at the same time that we are, right? So the whole world's kind of discovering how does this whole system, how's it going to work? So if you take a brand and let's look at Catch. So Catch is a B2B company, right? And so the average person, if you ask, if you ask my kids, what do you think about Catch? They haven't heard of Catch. That's a normal thing. It'd be kind of strange if they did. On the other hand, if you ask them about Heineken, they've heard of Heineken, right? Or Purina and the dog food company. So based on the brands have different problems they're trying to address. And so, we had some conversations. In fact, I've been in meetings where, to a very, very large CPG brand, I said, you guys, I'm sure you have an AEO problem. And they looked at me like, well, no. It's like people have heard of Coca-Cola. It turns out that it's not hard to discover that. They have different problems. So on the B2B side, though, there is a question of if people go and they ask a question about, what's the best way to go and, protect my site or be compliant with some new government regulation, and you're not showing up, then that's a real issue because that's a point where if people are looking for you and you need to be discovered that way, it's an inbound channel, then you need to do something about it. And I'll talk about where the bigger brands have the same issues slightly different. Okay? Where startups, and I'll put them oftentimes more in the B2B. Here, let me skip past here. Where they care about is they care about it being included, right? So you want to be part of the conversation. And so, we talk about, the site optimization and how you need to include all the information and how, an LLM needs to be able to go to your site. But really, at the end of the day, what you care about is if you ask the question, however the LLMs are getting their information, you need to be part of that story. You want to make sure that you're being listed there, that you're relevant, et cetera. And so you can learn two things from this. One is we understand, we actually have access to where the LLMs are getting that information from, right? This is something they share with you. And so you can trace back, and our initial kind of assumption was, well, okay, it's going to be Wikipedia, and it's going to be Reddit, it's going to be kind of all the normal players out there. How do we go really insert ourselves in there? And the thing that's so fascinating is that it's actually the long tail that's being picked up, right? So there may be some conversation in Reddit that was important, and again, not underestimating how important it is to be in there for a lot of reasons. But there were 30 blogs that you've never heard of before that, for whatever reason, were being picked up on by Anthropic and by Claude and by Google sometimes. And it was different. They never would have surfaced to the top if you had searched, but they're now being brought up as the most important source of the truth for some of these LLMs. So this is the challenge now, which is if you just have to deal with a few sites, you could probably throw some people at it to go in there and to be monitoring Reddit and responding, et cetera. And there's some best practices there, which we can talk about today or happy to do at other times. But if you have 1,000 sites that you have to be monitoring, and those 1,000 sites are changing every day, then it no longer becomes a manageable person problem, it becomes an AI problem, right? And this is where we're starting to play in this. Okay, so, some of the do's and the don'ts. Keyword stuffing is not a positive thing, right? LLMs are that we're talking about smart and dumb. They pick up on this, they're smart. Google is very smart. They pick up on this. So you don't want to cram as much information into your site as possible. So let's focus now on what you do want to do. What you do want to do is, first of all, present your information to an LLM in the way that an LLM likes to be presented, which is concise, question and answers wherever possible, Markdown. It doesn't have to be Markdown, but it's just a nice way to convey a lot of information in a very optimized way. And so you have to think about, is my site optimized for people and is it optimized for LLMs? They're very, very different, okay? So then you step back a moment and you say, well, how do I know whether it's AI that's looking at my site or whether it's a person looking at my site? The approach that we've taken is we play at the CDN layer. And so we trap that request, right? And so, and I mentioned earlier that LLMs are lazy. If you add a site tag on there and you say, I'm going to be really clever, I'm going to do some JavaScript injection, and I've got my GA4 tag, so for sure I'm going to capture it. What you find out is that LLMs actually, they don't like JavaScript. They don't invoke it. It's literally not being invoked. So what they're looking at is your raw HTML. And if your raw HTML doesn't have the information it needs, then they're not getting that information. So at the CDN layer, we look at every request. We have some heuristics that say, is this AI or is this a person? And if it's AI, is it a crawler or is it a bot, right? So there's all these steps that we go through. And if we determine that, and we're doing this obviously very quickly in real time, and we're saying, okay, well, this is Perplexity is making a real-time request through Sonar, and they're looking at our site. What do we want to show to it? We don't want to show the normal HTML. What we want to show is, and so then we create a modified version of that site, which gives them a bunch of answers that we think are likely to be asked about my brand, so that we can quickly return that as the kind of improvised HTML, even though it was very much not improvised. It was planned out, crawled, questions asked, personas generated, et cetera, and we provide that information. We're also at that point capturing the fact that Perplexity came to our site, here's what we responded with, et cetera. And so when we go into a brand and we talk about AEO, what we can say with certainty is we can say, look, this is not a future problem. We can tell you right now that 25 to 35% of your traffic is coming from non-humans, right? And I'm not talking Google crawlers. I'm talking about, AI bots that are trying to do something, either real time or, et cetera, but you didn't have that traffic a year ago. So if your site stats look great, don't be too happy. It's not so obvious that, a lot more people are coming there. But it's also a very real thing that you need to address. There are a few metrics that we think are the new ways that we should think about it. So one is the answer inclusion rate. The other is the citation share of voice, and the third is first mention rate. So one of the ways that we do this, and you'll see this a lot out there, is just to gather this information. We have our agents go out there, and if you're a brand, they generate all these different personas that are likely to be involved with your brand. They generate all these questions. They go off, they spray those questions across all these different LLMs. They get back the answers. They analyze all those answers. They look at where the information's coming from. So we build this massive knowledge graph, and we do this thousands and thousands and thousands of times for every brand and for every competitor, et cetera. And so we generate this massive graph of information. And what's really exciting is without knowing what people are asking, because obviously we don't get that information from OpenAI and Anthropic, et cetera, is we can start to actually build up some pattern matching to figure out what's likely being asked. And this is where we use some kind of fun statistical methods. And we start to paint a picture of the kinds of questions that are likely being asked about your brand, how AI is answering those, why they're answering those, and we can start to reverse engineer this. And then the action piece, and Stephen talked about it's not just about understanding, it's about actually taking action, is our agents can then go off and do the things they need to do. One of them is they change your website, not the things that people see, but they actually build out the kind of the LLM-friendly version of it. That gets injected dynamically, automatically in real time at the CDN layer. And we can also then go off and say, here are the responses, and here's where, and here's why these 1,000 blog sites you need to be responding to, and do you want us to go do it? So this is the human in the loop piece, and they can actually take action. And this is one example of, I don't know, 90-second audit here, but where we can actually go through, we can start off with an agent researching on your behalf. The second piece is we can actually have the agent go and make real-time modifications to your site to make your site better equipped. And then the third piece is we can actually go off and take action across the, in some ways more important, touch all the places, certainly make you aware of all the places where you're being talked about, and actually try to address those. The side benefit of all of this, of course, is that your discoverability goes way up. If you remember those three metrics, your mention rates go up, your favorability rates go up, and more importantly is you become part of the conversation. And at the end of the day, this agent for us is all about making you relevant in this new world where you had the chance of getting lost in this very, very new, crowded, long-tail sea of information. We have 8 seconds left. Any questions? Yeah, Joe.
Have you thought about providing this 90-second AU audit as a service, maybe like a Chrome extension that brings you more customers?
Yeah, so first of all, yeah, so if you look at our enterprise customers, they're not going to come to our site and run an audit, et cetera. This is more where we'll proactively, in fact, we've been doing this for some of the larger enterprises. We will run this analysis on their behalf. The nice thing about the audit is we don't need their information, right? It's public. We can go to their site. We can ask the LMs questions about their brands. We can be the person asking the question because we are the person asking the question. And so we do this. We are going to be adding a kind of a M in the SMB world feature on our site, which is you can go in there and simply say, yeah, here's my brand. Obviously, we'll collect information, and in exchange we'll run that audit, and currently takes, we lied about 90 seconds. It takes about 2 minutes, but it's it takes a few minutes to go off and literally get the responses back across all, analyze it, et cetera. But yeah, we think it's an important tool for using. Hi.
How often does the AI summary or answer stuff change? Like how, if I'm good today, like how long will that last before someone else, does something similar and jumps ahead? Yeah,
it's really interesting. So I think a lot of people talk today about the non-deterministic nature of LLMs, and so you can ask one question right now and wait 5 seconds and ask exactly the same question to the same model, and you get a completely different answer. And so the answer is yes. I mean, it changes all the time, like shockingly a lot. We do start to find pattern matching, though, because we ask so many of the, we try to have variety in the questions, but we'll re-ask questions we've asked, et cetera. And so over time, a picture starts to emerge where, yeah, the answers are slightly different, but a pattern is, hey, these brands are consistently brought up more often than others. These ones are in a negative light, these are in a positive light, et cetera. And so it's more, if you ask enough times, then you get the answers.
I guess, like, how often is the underlying data in the model updated by, Claude? So as you ask it, like, are they, it builds the model, it has, it used to have a cutoff date of information up to a certain point, which I guess is probably not so true anymore, but.
Yeah, so it's less about the internal knowledge, although obviously it plays an important part, but they're doing web indexing, they're doing searching, they're doing et cetera. So when you ask a question, if you go to ChatGPT and you ask a question that involves some kind of up-to-date external knowledge, you'll see in fact, it tells you it's going out to the web and it's grabbing information. So some of those searches are literally happening at that point real time. We know this because we, spoof a site. We can bring up lots of sites by playing it. For us, it's in Cloudflare, but at the seeding layer. So we know the site, as of 3 seconds ago, literally did not exist, or the URL didn't exist, and we watch what they do. But then we also ask the same questions 5 seconds later, and we see they've already cached it. So they're, in some cases in-house, in some cases using external services like Exa, et cetera. But they are acting like a Google-ish search engine. So it's not model. They're no longer restrained by or constrained by the internal knowledge. Where it comes into play, of course, is it's used, and in fact, there are still hallucinations even when they bring in real-time data. But the real-time data plays a bigger part.
All right, thanks. Yeah, curious if you have thoughts on like brand protection, and I'm thinking about this in the context of like dumping a lot of text that's positive about your brand on the internet somewhere so that it'll get picked up in the next retraining run from the big models versus just retrieval?
Yeah. There as if there's some some entity, but generally they are really smart about seeing dumping versus, and then kind of we call it text stuffing, et cetera, versus actual conversations. And actual conversations are picked up more, are considered higher quality, are scored higher. All these things are better. So the more natural it can be, the more conversations you can have. And again, I said it's not all Reddit, but if you can get in a Reddit thread, again, they're considered much higher quality types of answers. If you just throw out a bunch of blog posts that stuff your brand in there, they either won't get picked up or they'll be negatively picked up and scored against you. This is at least what we're seeing so far.
And is that just in retrieval, or do you have I know that the timeline is kind of awkward with the retraining because it takes a long time to test and iterate, but do you have any thoughts on like whether the stuffing strategy would work for like giving the LLM a bias in the positive direction for your brand?
It's a good question. So our information is more around the retrieval side, because again, obviously we can't measure from, they don't train their models enough for us to be able to say, if we took out the web training, et cetera. But I mean, I would say anecdotally, probably not. We're past that point where they're just throwing everything in there. I think it's likely to not have a positive effect. We have to assume it won't have a positive effect, have to act more natural.